Distinguished delegates, good morning. Good morning, distinguished delegates. Please take seats. It's our last day, but still we have some work to do. So please. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Good morning to all. We are here in the large part of this conference. I believe we have done very good work until now, and in this conclusive session, we are going first to have the reports on the outcome from our thematic sessions. Before having some remarks related to the thematic sessions, I believe that it was obvious that our conference were enriched by different very interesting side events. And on the ground of the thematic sessions, I would like to stress that from the point of view of the education, it's now more obvious than ever that sustainability is not a separate subject matter in education, but it has to be incorporated in the whole action and life of our schools. And our aim is to start as much as possible from the early stage, from the younger ages in schools, because, as we say, it's urgent. We don't have time. We cannot wait some decades to have our new citizens that will be conscious, but we need to act and to act now, and of course to act together. The idea is that our schools will be committed not only through typical formal education, but also through other actions, and that adopting a holistic approach, our schools will also interact with the community. And there was the value of some side events that demonstrated and showed the way to initiate a new culture. I would like to inform the delegates that the discussions under this agenda item will be organized. First, the conference will hear brief reports on the main outcomes of the two thematic segments on sustainable infrastructure and sustainable tourism. We can spend up to 10 minutes per report. And after each presentation, we will have the time, about half an hour, 30 minutes, that will be dedicated to questions or comments from the floor.
So we will have the reports on the outcomes of the thematic sessions. I would like to invite Mrs. Nino Tandilashvili, the chair of the thematic segment on greening the economy in the pan-European region and working towards sustainable infrastructure, to report on the key outcomes from the discussion under this agenda item. Let me also invite Mrs. Mirella Cumbaro, the chair of the thematic segment on applying principle of circular economy to sustainable tourism, to to come here in order to report later on the outcomes from the discussion under this specific agenda item.
Thank you very much. Good morning, dear colleagues, dear delegates. I think that yesterday we had opportunity to discuss very important aspects related to the sustainable infrastructure, and it was quite an interactive discussion that we had yesterday. So here are some of the important elements and recommendations that is based on our discussion from yesterday. Because of the war and after the pandemic, we are in danger of losing sight of the global environmental crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss, and the pollution of our planet with waste and chemicals. Of course, we need solutions that tackle several crises at once and that make our economy and society more resilient. Sustainable infrastructure is a key element for building resilience. Learning from the past and respecting nature will be also important for all of us. Sustainable infrastructure is often part of carbon neutrality strategies and policies in countries. Current brown infrastructure has a large environmental footprint, including on biodiversity. Infrastructure is responsible for 60% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Improvements are therefore urgent. Extreme hydrological events remind us that a more sustainable economy and infrastructure are needed. The role of impact assessment tools will be equally important for greening the massive infrastructure reconstruction efforts that will be needed in Ukraine. Impact assessment can also be used for the evaluation of environmental damage resulting from conflicts. Nature-based solutions are underused and can be a low-cost measure in many projects. The use of such solutions should be promoted more often. An inclusive green economy must stress the importance of integrated economic, social, and environmental policies that embrace opportunities for growth while avoiding unsustainable pressure on the quality and quantity of natural resources. There are challenges in collecting relevant data and monitoring to support the switch to sustainable infrastructure. Correct information, including maps, is crucial for sustainable infrastructure. The appraisal of projects in terms of economic return is not practiced in some countries. There is no excuse for continuing with unsustainable infrastructure in modern times. Information needed for the development of and investment in green infrastructure is available. Infrastructure planning and implementation needs to be a data and science-based process. Timely monitoring and evaluation using a science-based approach is, of course, very important. A common definition of sustainable infrastructure is important, and the use of common indicators as well. Exploring of innovative solutions is essential. Investments in sustainable infrastructure is, of course, essential, and infrastructure that puts nature in its heart can generate 170 million new jobs within the next 8 years. Investments in renewable energy alone could add over 40 million jobs to the global economy, while creating healthcare savings 8 times the cost of investment. The need to transform infrastructure is gaining momentum and new funding is becoming available. High-cost infrastructure projects need the support of financial institutions and mechanisms at the same time. A green public procurement action plan can be used to promote the use of environmentally friendly building materials. Maritime spatial planning and ISO certification promote the greening of port infrastructure. Some Mediterranean countries lack funding. Green bonds and microfinance are fundamental in this process. There is a need to address the timing of resources, such as upfront investments. Assessment of investment needs for climate action until 2030 requires classification of priority infrastructure projects through systematic, strategic, and economic assessments. With multi-sectoral projects prioritized in this respect. Results need to be monitored at the same time. Potential areas for investment in sustainable infrastructure are renewable energies, energy efficiency, power distribution, natural gas during the transition, waste management, mobility, green mobility, and smart green cities. Careful planning is required for investment in the transport sector. Of course, it's important to determine what transport investment is most beneficial to the general public and accordingly has priority for the implementation. Countries have a good practices of shifting investment to public transportation, digitalization, and new railway infrastructure. For example, by conducting an evaluation of all ongoing projects and discontinuing the financing of those that are unsustainable. Global environmental crises need an integrated policy approach and the active cooperation of all stakeholders in this process. A holistic approach from the very beginning is, of course, important, and sustainability needs to be also at economic and social levels. A stable regulatory environment, financial incentives, and science-based information are important for carrying out reforms and investments. Societal decision-making must guide the green transition. Refurbishing and building new infrastructure standards for greening need to be established through the policies. Sustainable infrastructure can be a connector between countries, fostering commitments and facilitating access to services through green and clean energy, smart grids, high-speed internet, electric vehicle charging stations, and upgrades to roads, airports, ports, passenger rail, and public transit. All solutions for infrastructure should go hand in hand with that biodiversity protection, and targets and climate change aspect need to be embedded in all projects. Reducing the environmental footprint of infrastructural projects has become more and more crucial. Decisions on sustainable infrastructure are decisions for the next 50 years. Building resilient infrastructure is critical to achieve the SDGs. There is a need to create an enabling environment for all stakeholders to be able to create and use sustainable and resilient infrastructure. And accountability, of course, is key to protect the environment. Sustainability infrastructure can create equal opportunity for all in promoting rural-urban connectivity and providing access in rural areas to basic services that are already available in urban areas. Good environmental governance, access to information, access to justice, stakeholder engagement, and public consultations when constructing infrastructures are needed to avoid harm to the environment. Identify potential impacts and to result in projects that are sustainable, inclusive, and resilient. Advancing sustainable infrastructure depends on effective public participation from the earliest stages of the project development, thereby avoiding later hindrances in projects and altering the construction of infrastructure. Additional efforts for active participation of stakeholders, including both the most vulnerable and the private sector, are important. The burden of the transition to sustainable infrastructure should not be borne by most vulnerable. Supporting education to sensitize the public and civil society, allowing for effective participation will be equally crucial. Peer-to-peer knowledge sharing and capacity building can be used to solve urban issues ranging from sustainability to inclusion to climate resiliency. There must be a more concerted effort on an awareness raising on climate change and its impact on infrastructure at all levels of society. Education for sustainable development in schools is particularly crucial. We also support partner countries in building sustainable infrastructure. The Environment for Europe conference processes and Environment for Europe process can be a mechanism to improve the situation in the pan-European region. The proportion of the population that lives in the cities continues to grow. Cities are where the need for greening is greatest, and therefore cities must be on board. Cities play a key role in achieving a carbon-neutral welfare society and the green transition in halting emissions and biodiversity loss. Both vertical and horizontal interaction between different levels of governance are needed. Local governments and communities are key given their capacity to deliver a positive impact for the people where they live. By involving all stakeholders and providing new opportunities for communities to strengthen sustainable development, it is important to ensure a clean, healthy environment for all. UNEP pledged to support member states in the region to promote sustainable and resilient infrastructure. With legal tools and guidelines from UNEC, the European Commission, OECD, UNEP, the European Environment Agency, and European Investment Bank, the way ahead is clear despite the complexity of infrastructure development, especially sustainable infrastructure. Accession to and implementation of multilateral environmental agreements, such as those of UNEC, notably the ESPO Convention on Environmental Impact Assessment and its protocols on strategic environmental assessment, and the Aarhus Convention, is of course important. Voluntary commitments by countries and organizations under BIGI is very much relevant and important as well. Countries should promote guidelines and standards on sustainable and resilient infrastructure, such as the SURE rules, UNDRR principles for resilient infrastructure, and the stress test methodology should be applied, providing best practices for embedding resilience in infrastructure development processes. Country examples, including establishing dedicated funds to support industries to transform into less polluting, especially those in rural areas, including waste recycling, is crucial. Government support to citizens to retrofit their homes using solar energy is practiced widely. That's, of course, briefly about all the recommendations and key outcomes from yesterday's panel discussion. And once again, I would like to thank you all for your active participation.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Dandilashvili, for this very interesting and comprehensive report. I would just like to let you know that the questions, comments, and interventions will be done after the presentation of the second report. The second report will be presented by Mrs. Mirela Kumbaro, the chair of the thematic segment on applying principles of circular economy to sustainable tourism. Mrs. Kumbaro, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It was a very interesting day yesterday talking about sustainable tourism and circular economy. It is interesting also that we came together with the two topics and with intervention from politicians, NGOs, civil society, business sectors, which means that we should be all together to combine the two sectors, which seems in the perception, collective perception, to be hostile. And the key messages from plenary session and the roundtable discussions of yesterday, let me present it to you in a more like a resume. The first topic, economic consideration of tourism sectors, are while the contribution of the tourism sector to the economy varies from country to country, it constitutes an important part of GDP everywhere, of many countries across the pan-European region, and not only in Europe. At the same time, in some countries, the tourism sector contributes to economic inequalities between tourist and non-tourist destination areas, resulting in an internal work migration from rural areas to the coastal zone, from the periphery to the center. Circular economy is essential for the sustainable development of tourism. Some financial instruments foster tourism that damages the local nature and culture. There is a need to develop innovative solution and financial instruments, as well as sustainable financing in general to support sustainable tourism. Impacts of the port facility, not only the cargo, but also the cruises. An option could be to limit the number of cruises per day. The impact on tourism sector. Of course, natural disaster and health pandemics impacts the tourism sector, the recovery of which is slow. Consequences of conflicts and wars have a lasting impact on the tourism sector also. On the other side, environmental pressure from tourism sector are present. The tourism sector has a considerable environment footprint. The tourism sector has an important impact on climate change and biodiversity and other resources, natural resources. Transports accounts for almost half of tourism-related greenhouse gas emissions. In particular, tourism has resulted in the destruction of coastal ecosystems, and on the other side, all sectors contributing to tourism need, by the way, to adapt and transform to become green and sustainable. The pandemic confirmed we must think more about how we live and how and what we consume, and made even more evident how human activities impact ecosystems. It is important to measure the carrying capacity of the travel destination, and NGOs can help in this measurement. There is a need to establish a balance between a common trading market and circularity. The cooperation is another topic. Ministries in charge of the environment are encouraged to build synergies with ministries in charge of tourism. Let me remind again the model of Albania, where we have in the same ministry tourism and the environment together. The private sector, among other stakeholders, in addition to horizontal cooperation between the different sectors that contribute to tourism. Cooperation between public and private sectors is key to success. There is a need to partner more with UNWTO and to use guidelines for sustainable tourism. Join networks that sustainable consumption and production in tourism policies and practices to address the challenges of pollution, biodiversity loss, and climate change. Promote knowledge sharing and networking opportunities to define collective priorities and identify solutions together, such as the One Planet Sustainable Tourism Program. Another topic very important is the participation of public. It is crucial to engage NGOs along with the private sector in all actions and activities in greening the tourism sector. Civil society could play a more important role in the fight against plastic pollution from the sector. NGOs should be involved in the exchange of experience and good practice in sustainable tourism strategy. Involvement of local community. We are all witnesses of the sale of cheap imported goods as tourist souvenir, things that should be replaced by locally produced products and crafts. There is also a need to provide adequate support to the transition of local community to sustainability. Often tourism has an impact at the destination and can lead to difficult discussions with local communities. This is why it's so important to involve them. Involvement of the business also. Governmental action towards sustainable tourism must go hand in hand with action from business actors. Opportunities exist to develop sustainable value chains and shift towards reuse or at least recycling of materials. Eco-labels can be used to designate businesses practicing sustainable tourism and for sustainable tourism destination. Change needs to come from inside the business. there is a need for better coordination on working with the private sector. Seize the opportunity to talk to the private sector to change the paradigm and present opportunities for companies to be green. Another aspect, very important for the present but also for the future, is education for sustainable development and capacity building. Targeted capacity building on sustainable tourism should be offered to stakeholders engaged in the tourism sector, including local authorities and communities, hotel, restaurant, enterprises, etc. The aim would be to develop the capacity for actors in the tourism sector to equip them with knowledge and practice of sustainability and circularity of tourism sector. Further, research and development of innovative solutions for making tourism sector sustainable needs to be fostered with the aim of applying principles of circularity and zero waste. More generally, awareness about sustainable tourism needs to be raised. Data and information is also important. There is a lack of comparable indicators for measuring the circularity and sustainability of the tourism sector, and monitoring is needed. Criteria could be developed to measure the carbon footprint of the tourism sector. Labeling is among the methods that can provide the consumer with clear and reliable information about the circularity of products. Sustainable tourism components should be measured by indicators to ensure comparability between sectors and topics to enable assessing the level of sustainability of the tourism sector. Good examples of measuring exist in some countries, such as on the use of renewable energy sources, energy consumption for overnight stays, and the level of acceptance by the local population of tourists and tourist activities. Mass media has an important role in promoting environmental and sustainable development solutions. Tourism statistics should cover domestic tourists in addition to international one. Using tools for measuring commitment made it vital in order to measure progress to achieving. On the other side, which is becoming more important for us as politicians, the legal and policies used. There is a gap in many national legal and policy frameworks on assessing the environmental impact of the tourism sector. Good example of making mandatory separate collection of waste, including transportation of bio-waste to compost treatment facilities for big hotels and catering businesses. A circular economy model needs to be introduced for the tourism sector. The new focus on sustainability is driving changes in tourism. Standards and methodology need harmonization. Countries do have good examples, such as the Cyprus Sustainable Development Tourism Initiative. National governments cannot make decisions alone. Their multiple layers of stakeholders must be involved. The national government can be the bridge between communities and the private sector, and NGOs can help facilitate this. Available policies, mechanisms, and tools include UN, for example, just a list, UN resolution on sustainable tourism, UN framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production, UN WTO Glasgow Declaration for Sustainable Tourism, Global Tourism Plastics Initiative, Statistical Framework for Measuring the Sustainability of Tourism, UN resolution that paves the way for a binding global plastic treaty, a Spoiled Beaches Initiative which prohibits any action that is unsustainable, Green Public Procurement, Big E past and new voluntary commitment by countries and organizations, eco-certification of tourism destinations, One Planet vision for a responsible recovery of the tourism sector, digital products passport, for example, for batteries, big data to assess tourism trends and concrete methodologies and indicators to assess sustainable tourism mobility. General prerequisites of sustainable tourism include circular economy, sustainable mobility, sustainable destination, partnership to promoting the sustainability of tourism sector. And recognition, of course, of limited resources and therefore putting a limit of touristic activities in some cases. Next step and action needed. The tourism sector is forecast to grow considerably, those underlining the urgency to transform the sector into a sustainable one. Circular economy offers a new paradigm for the development of a sustainable tourism sector. Decision makers and entrepreneurs should apply circular economy principles across the tourism value chain. Circularity should be the major strategy for the transformation and recovery of the tourism sector from the COVID-19 pandemic. Decision making must be science-based knowledge and information. Incentivize the tourism business to turn to sustainable practices in tourism. Payment for ecosystem services is a key mechanism for the way forward. Environmental and cultural needs should be reflected in the tourism sector. The impacts of international and extreme mobility at tourist destinations must be reduced. The vision for sustainable tourism is in the 2030 agenda through the SDGs. Sustainable tourism is an underestimated driving force that can shift other sectors, such as the energy sectors, towards sustainability. The ministries of tourism need to be brave enough to create a projected target to 2030 in terms of tourism that would not grow above a given percentage. This is vital if tourism is to be circular. Measuring the carrying capacity of destination could also be a way to work towards circular tourism. Practical actions include phase out and ban single plastic products, limit water consumption and promote reuse of water, introduce deposit refund system for glass bottles, among other products, and remove barriers in border regions. Promote consumption of food from local producers. Promote culture and agrotourism respecting local heritage. Remove funding from unsustainable brown tourism. Organize events to promote and celebrate sustainability in tourism sector. Activate the work on plastic pollution in the tourism sector, including in the mountains areas. Continue dialogues and cooperation between public authorities working in areas relevant for sustainable tourism. There are some of the conclusions of fully day working and debates. It seems to me a fantastic program that it's like a cahier de charge for every country, every actors, every business sector in the tourism, and not only tourism. More and more we have to use together the two words. Sustainable tourism and circular economy should be inseparable. Thank you very much, and thank you also for organizing this very interesting conference meeting, which given to us also the possibility to meet together, to exchange, and to have good practices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mirella, for this comprehensive presentation of the report. I think that it was made clear through the presentation that developing measures for promoting sustainability in tourism is very important, but it is also important measuring the impact of these measures, measuring the sustainability in the tourism sector, and we have to keep this in mind. Dear colleagues, at this point, I would like to open the floor for questions, comments, and interventions. I think that Mrs. Kern from the European Eco Forum asked for the floor.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. And let me use this opportunity to thank you personally and indeed all of the government of Cyprus and all of the organizers, also the Secretariat, and you, Madam Chairs of these thematic sessions, which were very interesting indeed. I also want to thank all of my colleagues at the European Eco Forum, and in particular Friends of the Earth Cyprus, who have made this, our participation really possible, the Federation of Environmental Organizations of Cyprus, Terra Cyprus. And I also, one thing that I really want to emphasize is I appreciate also this opportunity for us members of society, civil society, to take the floor in keeping with Article 3.7 of the Aarhus Convention, with that each party promote the application of the principles of that convention in international environmental decision-making processes and within the framework of international organizations in matters relating to the environment. I think that is a crucial, a fundamental principle that should hold for all parties, but is so much more meaningful given that this instrument was created under the aegis of the UNECE and within this part of this EFE process at large. That brings me to the next point, which was just some comments about the outcomes regarding sustainable infrastructure, because it's related. If I'm not mistaken, so you, Madam Chair, mentioned the importance of the ESPO Convention, the Aarhus Convention, SEA protocol, as tools to ensure that we really achieve sustainable infrastructure. And I believe in the plenary, the Czech Republic also made this point, and I wanted to express my appreciation for that point. In our view, those instruments are not ways to hinder, but are indeed necessary, integral ways in order to ensure that the development of critical infrastructure is indeed sustainable. As regards to further to that first thematic session on infrastructure, I also especially appreciate the comments, I believe, if not mistaken, apologies, I believe from the Deputy Director of UNEP, as regards to the critical need to address issues and have participation at the planning stage, and only that way can we really protect critical biodiversity. That's our experience. And I had the pleasure of taking part in the roundtable, which was very lively, very helpful indeed. And I think we had virtual, I want to say consensus at the very least, maybe everyone agreed that planning is a necessary, critical stage that is needed to ensure that infrastructure development is truly sustainable and protects biodiversity. And in that strategic planning stage, the necessity of engaging not just the public, but mayors, for example, using all sort of local stakeholders, local authorities at all levels. I also, returning just briefly to the plenary, I wanted to also mention, I believe it was Sweden mentioned a number of measures that they're taking in this area, both as regards to rural, or perhaps I'm moving now to tourism, for rural activities, and also to make sure that sustainable cities are better protected. And just very briefly to return then to the issue of sustainable tourism, I really appreciate it, and it came out so clearly, and I think it was very valuable both in plenary and as you just reported, Madam Chair, that we have to use COVID as a chance for a reset. It is a reset, and it's an opportunity indeed. It lets us reformulate really what our advantages are, how we can best proceed. And in this regard, I believe Cyprus mentioned a number of measures that they use to support more sustainable tourism, better use of local resources, and I think in the breakout sessions, this also was discussed about local food and such measures. We think that is excellent. But what I think what I've heard from my colleagues, I had to, because infrastructure is more my area, I had a session to go to a side event. But what I heard is that what seems to be less clear and what we would like to see improvement on is the need for a common strategy, a common vision, common standards, because there is some difference of understanding about what circular tourism even means. And obviously, we support very much indeed the comment you made, Madam Chair, about reporting about the special role that the engagement with NGOs and local stakeholders can play in actually achieving that. Finally, I also found it a really interesting takeaway, because we don't always expect it to be so successful, that Albania has tourism and environment under one roof. One could imagine that would lead to conflicts or be inadvisable, but perhaps that is emerging as truly a brilliant solution. And analogous to that, we have in Austria, we have a huge, the environmental ministry was recreated, and it has climate, it has transport, it has, I can't list how many, and exactly about critical aspects of infrastructure. Well, maybe this is a good measure and path going forward, is recognizing these sectoral exchanges and using ministries to accomplish that. So thank you for that. And I'll close just with the expectation that you all, we assume, are visionaries. You are that, and we, civil society, call upon you and ask for nothing less than you to do that. And so we hope that you will all then return to your home countries and implement this with clever solutions, and using both from the range of hard laws to very innovative solutions using soft measures, capacity building measures, etc. And we NGOs very much welcome the chance to assist you in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kern, for your remarks. Are there any other requests for? Yes, the Deputy Minister of Tourism from Cyprus.
Hi again. As an introduction, I hope you had a great couple of days in Cyprus. The weather has been very good for you. And if we don't talk before you leave, I wish you a safe journey back. My final and conclusive statements about these couple of days we've had together, and I congratulate everybody for the great work. Mirela, you did an excellent job on summarizing everything we said. With the exception of you and me, there are no other tourism ministers here. My message to all other ministries, whether it's education, whether it's environment, is to not be afraid to give the floor of leadership to the tourism ministers of your country. Because ultimately, we in tourism, we're here to make people happy. That's what we do, that's our job. And Cyprus is a good example of how a Ministry of Tourism has repurposed its tourism industry. We don't work for tourists. We first work for locals. And our motto is that if our locals are happy when visiting the island as tourists themselves, or if they are happy in their daily lives, visitors will also be happy. So we do have a role to play as ministers of tourism. And I do hope that in the future, we will be able to contribute even more. I am certain that even if not all countries will do what Albania did, and I understand it's not easy to make this decision, tourism and the environment in the same ministry, definitely we from tourism want to be next to you, the environment ministers and the education ministers, because what you're doing impacts us and what we are doing can help you. That's all.
Yeah, please. Thank you. I would just to add something. Albania is becoming a model in these moments. I don't know if I'm invited here more as Minister of Tourism or as Minister of Environment. I still don't know, but being alone only with my colleague of Cyprus, maybe I'm here mostly as Minister of Environment. And I totally agree that we should be all together decision makers for tourism and environment, because till we are considering that these two sectors are hostile to each other, we cannot find the right solution. We have to put together. We know that we cannot live without tourism or without environment. So Albania 4 years ago chose to put it together, tourism and environment, in the same portfolio as ministry, because we think that we cannot protect environment putting tourism outside, and we cannot develop tourism without taking care of the environment. On the other side, I'm always talking about Albania. We have beautiful attraction on the environment: mountains, river, forestry, of course the seaside, beautiful beaches, but protected areas are very important to us, and we have already 21.5% of the territory protected areas, which is important for environment, but is on the other side a fantastic attraction for ecotourism, for agrotourism. And combining all together this element, we think that is the best way to protect environment and to ensure sustainable tourism. This is why I totally agree with you, my friend, that politicians taking decision on the environment should be together seated with the ministers of tourism, with the agency of tourism as public authorities. So maybe we can add another conclusion today, that in the next big meeting organized by UN, different UN agencies, we should be together. And maybe other countries can follow this modest model that we have created to have one ministry for environment and tourism. Thank you very much.
Well, in Cyprus, we have two different ministries, but I think that we have an open channel of collaboration, and we are developing together our policies. So this interaction is constant, I would say. Yes, Brother.
Yes, I don't want to complicate things. Waiting in the next meetings to have, really, we need to have with us more ministers for tourism. I have to stress that when we say, talking about sustainable education for sustainable development, that we need a holistic approach to have our schools and our society initiate a culture of sustainability. We have to keep in mind that every day in our schools, we have a large part of tourists. Children are tourists with their families. And at the same time, we have those people that we will work in a few years in the tourist industry. And they will be tourist consumers worldwide. And at the same time, interaction is here because talking about sustainable infrastructure, we have to take care of our school buildings. To have a holistic approach means that we transform our buildings and installations. Every day in schools, we have a large part of our society consuming energy. So here we are all together, and all ministers, more or less, we have to take care of this new agenda we have, and we see obviously the interactions and the need for cooperations inside every society, but between also our societies. Thank you.
Thank you, Prodrome. I don't see any other request for comments. So I would like to thank our panelists for presenting their report. And before concluding agenda item 7, I would like to express my gratitude to all participants of the plenaries and the discussions of the 2 main themes of the ministerial conference for their active participation and their input into the co-chair's summary. As we are on the path for recovering our economies in these challenging times, the focus should not be lost from our initial aim. We should build our communities better, to be more sustainable, to be more resilient, and to be more inclusive. Building sustainable infrastructure and adapting circular tourism models are essential towards tackling the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, and accelerate our pace towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations 2030 Agenda. Greening the economy through sustainable infrastructure is the cornerstone of this transition. The structures we build need to serve our needs, but also accommodate the needs of the future generations. The guidance provided by UNESCO through its conventions and their protocols, as well as other organizations such as UNEP, the European Commission, the European Environment Agency, and the OECD, set the framework to work and the methodologies to follow. The innovation tools we have in our hands allow us to strategically plan and assess the potential impact on the environment from its conception. The development of sustainable infrastructure by investing in nature-based solutions must be at the core of green development policies and strategies, while early integration of environmental considerations into infrastructure planning decisions is more important than ever, locally, regionally, and in the transboundary context. Tourism is a vital economic sector in many developed and developing countries, which also has a large indirect effect on other sectors of the economy. The current more or less linear growth model followed by the tourism sector has a significant environmental footprint, exceeding the ecological limits due to increased energy demand, high amounts of waste and wastewater generation, water consumption, and increased greenhouse gas emissions. Just as Cyprus, tourism destination countries unavoidably face additional environmental challenges. The circular economy promotes the transition from the current linear model in which products are produced, consumed, and discarded to a new circular economy model which aims to close the loop where the value of products and raw materials is preserved as much as possible and the waste production prevention. Through prevention, reuse, and recycling. The application of the circular economy in the tourism sector, as well as in the industry and businesses, creates and exploits opportunities to redefine the productive sectors of the economy from linear to circular, enhancing their sustainability, productivity, employability, and competitiveness, while reducing their environmental footprint and expanding their business activity. Thank you all for your attention and participation. I'm now closing agenda item 7, and I think we can move to the next agenda item. I would like to open the agenda item 8, titled Adapting the Conference's Outcomes. Thank you very much for your contribution.
You should invite Elizabeth.
We should. I would like to call the Deputy Executive Director of UNEP, Mrs. Sonia Layton-Kohn. And the Chair of UNESCO Committee on Environmental Policy, Mrs. Elisabetta Quintas da Silva. And the Executive Secretary of UNESCO, of course, Mrs. Olga Algayerova. Elisabeth is here? Okay. So I think that we are coming to the most important part of the conference, the adoption of the outcomes. First, I would like to thank the UNESCO Committee on Environmental Policy for preparing the draft ministerial declaration, which is submitted to the conference for adoption. And I'm pleased I'm in the pleasant position to invite you all, both ministers and heads of delegation, to adopt the ministerial declaration. Is there any objection? So we consider that the declaration has been approved. Well, at this point, I would like to open the floor for possible statements on the ministerial declaration. And I have some requests here. First, Mr. Davor Perkan, European Commission, on behalf of the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, as you mentioned, I would like to deliver this statement on behalf of the EU and its member states. At the 9th Ministerial Environment for Europe Conference, we have focused on how to make tourism and infrastructure more sustainable. We have discussed our achievements since the first Environment for Europe conference in Dobříš, and also future challenges linked to sustainable development, the ESD, and greening the economy. We welcome the ministerial declaration that strongly condemns the unprovoked and unjustified aggression against Ukraine by the armed forces of the Russian Federation. This aggression has severe ecological consequences in Ukraine and the surrounding region, which must be assessed by the relevant bodies to allow for a sustainable recovery. Moreover, we appreciate the focus on infrastructure and sustainable tourism in the declaration, more relevant than ever in the post-COVID-19 era, and we appreciate the emphasis on the role that innovation, circular approaches, public-private partnerships, and public participation play in this regard. We have reaffirmed our commitment to the implementation of the voluntary pan-European strategic framework for greening the economy adopted at the 8th Environment for Europe conference in Batumi, and we adopted the final progress report of the voluntary Batumi Action for Cleaner Air. We have welcomed the establishment of the shared environmental information system across the region to support environmental assessments and acknowledged the work on environmental performance reviews, including activities to prepare for the fourth cycle of EPRs under the ECE EPR program. We would like to thank our Cypriot hosts for the warm hospitality, and together with the UNECE Secretariat and Bureau for their hard work, contribution towards successful outcomes, and for the organization of this event. We stand firm in our support and commitment to the Environment for Europe process as a platform bringing together all relevant actors in the ECE region to address some of the strongest challenges of our times. And we look forward to our future work and successful cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Strilets, for your intervention and for presenting the European Commission's position. And it is very important that the European Union supports the Environment for Europe process. Now I invite Mrs. Nino Tandilashvili, Deputy Minister of Environmental Protection and Agriculture of Georgia, to present her comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues. It is worth outlining that the Nicosia Ministerial has reminded us of the importance of close cooperation and the urgent need for new initiatives and approaches towards environmental protection. Here in Nicosia, we confirm once again that the Environment for Europe process is indeed a unique platform in our pan-European region, which gives an opportunity for effective collaboration in order to provide our generations with a sustainable future. Let me reiterate that recent challenges such as COVID-19 pandemic and further Russia's war against Ukraine vividly have shown that more international effort is needed to effectively overcome them. The Nicosia Ministerial proved once again that the Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference is the right platform that supports in joining our efforts to turn ideas into reality for the better environmental protection, sustainable development, and well-being for our countries and thus the whole region. Addressing circular tourism and sustainable infrastructure at the conference, the two main themes which have to be properly considered in our activities towards protecting the environment and greening the economy, was a very important decision, helping us to better understand and adjust to the rapidly changing world. Education for sustainable development plays a critical role, without which a sustainable future is even unimaginable. Therefore, the importance of continuation and even strengthening the education for sustainable development topic in the Environment for Europe ministerial agenda should be underlined. I'm convinced that the huge work finally resulted in the two documents of Nicosia Conference, the Ministerial Declaration and the Ministerial Statement on Education for Sustainable Development, will guide us effectively in our future activities in transforming our planet for better. Let me conclude my speech with the confidence that the outcomes of Nicosia Conference will highly contribute to further strengthening regional cooperation, supporting good environmental governance, and expanding partnerships in order to ensure stability and sustainable development of the countries. Let me once again thank the government and the people of Cyprus for their exceptional hosting and the hospitality, and the UNECE for organizing the conference, and wish even more success to the Environment for Europe process for the well-being of our region and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Tandilashvili, for your remarks and for all your contribution to the conference. And now I invite Mr. Ruslan Strilets, and I apologize for the mistake that I made before, the Minister of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine for his intervention.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to all the signatories of the Ministerial Declaration of the 9th Environment for Europe Conference for their resolute stance regarding Russian aggression in Ukraine. I'd like to thank Cyprus for hosting this very important event. We call on the whole world to fight against evil. Ukraine has already achieved a lot of assessing the impact of Russian aggression on nature. We are ready to share our experience with all countries suffering from armed aggression. Good will overcome evil. Ukraine will defeat Russia. And together with us, the whole civilized world will defeat Russia and protect nature. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For once again, we express our solidarity to Ukraine and the support and our support towards a sustainable recovery of the country. I invite now Mrs. Judith Garber, United States Ambassador to Cyprus, for her comments. No. Is Mrs. Garber here? No. The next intervention comes from Mrs. Svitlana Slesar-Renok, from the European Eco Forum.
Thank you. I am here. I am speaking today on behalf of the European Eco Forum. Every day, Russia's aggression against Ukraine brings new destruction to people and to the environment. Incidents at nuclear power plants and facilities, energy infrastructure, including oil storage tankers and oil refineries, drilling platforms and gas facility, and distribution pipelines, mines, and industrial sites and agro-processing facilities have resulted in multiple air pollution incidents and potentially serious contamination of ground and surface waters. There is nothing more unsustainable than war. There is no sustainability without peace. There is no peace without sustainability. We urge everybody to support green, sustainable, and resilient reconstruction of Ukraine. For peace and sustainability to be accomplished, the UNSC region needs to stop their addition to and dependency on coal and other types of fossil fuels. Our region needs to accelerate to achieve the energy transition to 100% renewables by 2040. Above all, in moving forward, we must avoid false solutions and focus on nature-positive and people-centered energy transition. We need to recognize that limits on Earth's carrying capacity and move towards a circular and green economy. We need a fundamental transition to sustainable production, consumption system, and practices across all sectors. The European Eco Forum and NGOs will actively contribute to continuing implementation of the outcomes of the Nicosia Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference and its previous conferences. Thank you.
Now I invite Mrs. Rebecca Hovelmans from the Women Engage for a Common Future organization for her remarks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Dear delegates, my name is Rebecca Heuvelmans, a young ecofeminist speaking today on behalf of Women Engage for a Common Future. We're part of the European Eco Forum. Despite having over 30 years behind the Environment for Europe process and many good decisions taken at 8 previous conferences, grave problems in terms of implementation remain. With biodiversity declining, climate change disasters happening, and energy prices skyrocketing, there's an urgent need for long-lasting, green, and inclusive solutions. Clearly true for those marginalized groups, including women in all their diversity, minorities, and low-income groups who are hit the hardest by these developments. Sustainable solutions cannot be made in silos. Civil society plays an essential role in enhancing decision-making on the diverse range of topics this process covers, including air pollution, education for sustainable development, waste and water development, and climate change. But we can only operate successfully in the right conditions. As representatives of civil society, we note with concern that the opportunity for the free and open expression of opinions in many countries in the UNEC region is reducing in a disturbing way. Environmental and human rights defenders calling out unsustainable fossil fuel or nuclear energy solutions and opposing infrastructure development are often at risk of intimidation, harassment, persecution, and lawsuits. We welcome the appointment for the first special rapporteur on environmental defenders under the newly created rapid response mechanism under the Aarhus Convention, and call upon all governments to support this critically important work. Being able to safely raise our voice for environmental justice is a right and a must for true progress on sustainable development. We thank the government of Cyprus for their support of the European Eco Forum and the NGO delegation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hovelmans, for your statement. And the next intervention comes from Mr. Zoltan Marusha, State Secretary for Public Education of Hungary.
Thank you, Chair. Hungary joins, of course, the other ministers in supporting the ministerial declaration. We would like to take this opportunity to make an important announcement. On behalf of the Hungarian government, we are delighted to invite you to the WHO 7th Environment and Health Ministerial Conference that will take place in Budapest from the 5th to 7th July next year. The conference is expected to accelerate progress in addressing challenges for health coming from the triple crisis of environmental pollution, climate change, and lots of biodiversity. We will be proud to have all of you in Budapest next year, and we hope to offer the same level of warm hospitality as we all are enjoying here in Cyprus. With this, I would like to invite you to watch a short video about the conference. Thank you very much and see you next year in Budapest. Please start the video.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the information that you have provided for this very, very interesting conference. I think that all of us would like to be there in such a beautiful place and to discuss so interesting issues. I would like to ask if there are any other requests for interventions. Yes, I have the Mr. Hederman from the World Organization of the Scout Movement.
Chair, dignitaries, representatives of governments, civil society organisations, to all involved and present at the 9th Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference, I'd like to present the Youth Declaration, formed through a coalition and a meeting of young people last night, which we'd like to share with you. Out of 1,000 participants present today, only 3% are young people. Approximately 30 young people are present. Although young people are not traditionally governmental decision makers, we are the leaders of today and tomorrow. Every social movement is inextricably linked to the passion and work of young people. It is time the policy-making rooms feel this undeniable energy, creativity, and fresh thinking. We represent one of your largest demographics, with 31% of the world's population being made up of young people. We are facing a typhoon of crises, from inhumane poverty to climate change, growing inequality to biodiversity loss. Education is the answer to unlock the solutions to these issues. But if we wish to have education for sustainable development that supports young people to develop these values, it must be for young people, by young people, about young people. Meaningful engagement should not be a privilege, but a fundamental right. Therefore, we need to support young people of all backgrounds accordingly. You make the decisions today and the tomorrow. We would like to emphasize that it was at the invitation of the Cypriot government and the UNECE organisers that gave us this opportunity to exchange ideas here. This is an important step in the right direction, which we are incredibly grateful and thank you for. A few years ago, it would have been unimaginable to be part of such a conference as a young person. Therefore, we see that youth participation has grown in recent years. We acknowledge efforts made by certain governments and institutions to involve young people, for which we commend. Yet there is a continued uphill battle. Decision-making should lift from being for youth to being with youth as an essential stakeholder. The adopted frameworks, particularly the framework for the implementation of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe's strategy on education for sustainable development from 2021 to 2030, addresses youth participation and sees it as a key. We would therefore like to call on you today not only to demand it in frameworks, but also to implement it. A positive example of youth participation are the youth focal points of the Steering Committee on ESD. We would like to encourage you to effectively involve young people in UNECE processes in this way and in other formats, including interventions, panel discussions, and keynotes that are not solely focused on youth participations, but on the issues discussed at the decision-making table. With this declaration, we as the youth of the 9th Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference call on all stakeholders to take a number of calls to action to the forefront of the planning process of the next Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference and UNECE events where young people will be invited to participate. We have 5 or 4 key actions that I'd like to share with you, so that in future that every country delegation will be required to at least one seated and informed youth representative at EFE conferences. All young people at each EFE conference are required to write a collective perspective such as this one, which is accepted in the final official documentation. An onboarding procedure is required in advance of the conference for youth delegates focusing on the ECE formal processes and procedures, while providing an awareness of rights, responsibilities, and opportunities as a delegate. And finally, a 10% quota for our next conference. A quota of participants under the age of 30 at the next EFE conference, with a particular focus placed on enabling participation opportunities for groups that have not been represented or are underrepresented in these forums, such as young women, Black, Indigenous, and people of colour, as well as socio-economically disadvantaged and disabled youth. At an institutional level, introducing a youth test such as the one proposed by the European Youth Forum, and at a UNECE level, introducing a youth platform in the UNECE Committee of Environmental Policy are all moves that we would greatly appreciate. The youth test is an impact assessment tool that can ensure that young people are considered during policy-making processes. My friends, there is a fundamental difference between youth representation and youth participation. We hear all of your well-intended words about the potential of young people in each intervention that is made, but we need action on that wording. We see great progress and would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak and network and meet you all here. With this paper, we would like to show further possibilities for the future of meaningful youth participation. We need processes to back up your intentions, and finally, we need a meaningful seat at the table and equal treatment for those processes to work. In this statement, we are young people from North Macedonia, Romania, Belgium, Greece, Germany, Cyprus, Portugal, France, and Ireland. You are the decision makers, but we are the catalysts for change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was one of the main aims of this conference to receive the voice of the young people, and through your statement, we have done so. Yes, we have another request for intervention.
Thank you.
Please identify yourself.
My name is Rifat Sabbah. I am from the Palestinian delegation, but I am from the civil society in the delegation. Just want to add something. While we are working to protect the environment and to face the challenges of the climate change, I think the solidarity is very important. The solidarity, not just at the government's level, but also at the population level. The solidarity is not just word or a prayer in the church or in the mosque. The solidarity is a humanity action. The solidarity is action, a quick action when the people in the crisis. The solidarity is something linked with the values that we have as a human. And that's why it should be reflected in the curricula. It should be reflected at the cultural level. It should reflected in the strategy that the teachers use. Who think that cutting a tree in Brazil is not impact here in the Middle East, he is wrong. Everything is impacting us, and we impact the others in our actions. There is some countries like Pakistan, Sudan, who is really living in a very difficult situation. They have a heavy debt that they cannot move. So this is also some kind of solidarity. My colleagues before me, he mentioned the youth, and I agree. The youth also, beside the teachers, is the core actors in the coming period while we are facing the climate change challenges. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. Yes. I would like to ask now the Ambassador of the United States to Cyprus, Mrs. Garber, for her intervention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Since the 8th Environment for Europe conference in Batumi in 2016, as many have already noted over the past few days, war has returned to Europe. President Putin's illegitimate efforts to annex Ukrainian territory are a new low point in Russia's disregard of international law. We will never recognize these purported annexations, nor the sham referenda conducted at gunpoint. The Russian government's war of aggression against Ukraine is taking a heavy toll on the people and the environment, and it must end. We are concerned about the loss of human life and the damage Russia is doing to Ukraine's environment, the consequences of which will resonate in the immediate and longer term for the Ukrainian people and its neighbors. We are witnessing widespread damage to critical infrastructure and key ecosystems and the services they provide, including native forests and wildlife, civilian nuclear facilities, drinking water and wastewater systems, and chemical plants. This poses significant risks to the public and increases air, soil, and water pollution, harms biodiversity, and elevates emissions levels. The crisis in Ukraine also threatens food security worldwide, including the loss of Ukraine's vitally important seed bank that held germplasm not found elsewhere. The United States remains committed to working with Ukraine and like-minded countries to raise awareness of and to address these issues. The United States is committed to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We are working hard to help our world adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change and environmental degradation. I am proud to share that on September 21st, the US Senate gave its advice and consent to ratify the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. The United States will soon join the EU and 136 other countries to show its commitment to reduce global warming. We are supporting a global goal of conserving at least 30% of land and waters by 2030, and we are working to reduce rising levels of pollution, particularly air and plastic pollution, which are choking and drowning our planet. In pursuit of these goals, the United States recently enacted 3 key pieces of legislation. First, the bipartisan infrastructure law is rebuilding roads and bridges, replacing lead pipes to provide clean water, expanding high-speed internet across the country, and delivering cheaper and cleaner energy to households and businesses. Second, the historic Inflation Reduction Act sets up the United States to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% by 2030. We are hopeful that it will prompt other major economies to strengthen and implement ambitious 2030 emissions targets to keep within reach of a goal limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Third, the CHIPS and Science Act, among its other objectives, will drive increased investment in research and development in clean technologies and promote education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields that help create new solutions to help all of us build a sustainable future. A common thread running through our work and the twin themes of this conference, sustainable infrastructure and sustainable tourism, is that of circularity. The United States strongly supports diverse approaches towards circularity that promote sustainability, inclusivity, and resilience in meeting broader goals of reducing emissions, combating pollution, and minimizing demands on nature. We are active at the federal, state, and in addition to our private sector to enhance resource efficiency and advance innovation in the production and consumption of materials. The United States welcomes positive engagements on circular economy approaches that recognize multiple methods and regulatory frameworks and that facilitate trade and collaboration on improving environmentally sound management across the life cycle of the supply chains. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Garber, for your remarks. And I think that Professor Skoulos would like to have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I would like to express our thanks and gratitude actually to the government of Cyprus for the organization of this meeting, which included also the adoption, the discussion and adoption under the chairmanship of your co-chair, His Excellency Mr. Prodromou, the Mediterranean, the action plan of the Mediterranean strategy of education for sustainable development. But I didn't take the floor only for that. I wanted to mention that the conference does not finish here and now, and we have a very important event linked with the discussion we had already just after this meeting at 1:10 to 2 in Kerinia. because this is co-organized by the House of Representatives of Cyprus, the Circle of Mediterranean Parliamentarians for Sustainable Development, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Union for the Mediterranean, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean PAM, the Mediterranean Action Plan, UNICE, UFM, and the Mediterranean Information Office. It is the side event on environmental governance for transforming our planet, promoting the Aarhus Convention in the whole of the Mediterranean region. I think it is very important to remind everybody, because of the interest already expressed, that we will discuss this, how we can promote this basic for democracy and for transparency and public participation, including of youth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Skoulos. Thank you for reminding us about this very important side event. Of course, when you mentioned that the event will take place at Kyrenia, you meant the room Kyrenia. Because
thank you, exactly.
Kyrenia,
unfortunately,
as many of
cannot
you
be there.
may know, is a city which is occupied by the Turkish troops in the northern part of Cyprus.
It would be marvelous if we could have a side event in the town of Kyrenia. Let's hope another time.
So I think that there is a request from the Egyptian delegation.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I would like to thank the government of Cyprus for hosting this event. And my intervention is very relative to the our hosting for COP20, importance of the role of the youth, and we are looking forward to give the opportunity for the youth to be part of this discussion for climate day at the green zone during the COP27, a thematic day for youth, where all youth from all over the world can change experience and give their voice very clear and change how way forward to combat the climate change. At the same time, also Egypt is hosting the COP17, so the importance of youth to take really a role in this critical problem and critical challenge for climate change is very important for of us, and we would like to confirm about this. We'll take all the possible aid and support to make this is really happening during the COP27. Also, I would like to convey the message that all preparation for the COP27 is moving very well, starting from logistic, political, and also technical, and also everything related to the COP27 is moving very well, and would be happy to receive all you in less than 1 month in Sharm el-Sheikh to continue our discussion for this global challenge. We are taking the responsibility according to the mandates we got from the last meeting, our last conference, COP26 in Galaxo. So we will be really, I would like to be able to gather consensus how we can really go for implementation. It's a COP for implementation. We are looking all together to work together for moving forward for the agenda of climate change from just commitment to the action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that the majority of the people in this room will be in Sharm el-Sheikh after 1 month. And thank you for organizing this, this great event. Mr. Paradishotis.
Thank you for giving me the floor. First, I would like to say that I enjoyed the speech of the youth and their goals and their aims and their participation, and I congratulate them. I'm Pavlos Paradisiotis. I'm the president of a newly created non-governmental organization that was created last year, right after the big fires that took place in Cyprus, and it covered 8 villages. That was the fastest and the biggest fire in Cyprus and destroyed the area. Since that event, we saw this crisis and this damage as a prospect for the future. We created a strategic plan to recover the areas, not just recover, but we created a strategic plan for a 15-year plan to create the area as a prototype of recovery, restructuring, and development of an area after a crisis. And we are in this step. And I want to strongly stress that one of our pillars is sustainability. And this is not a major pillar, but it's a pillar that is on which all other pillars are based. So I want to say, and I want to stress that I hope in a few years, everybody to be able to come and enjoy this area with all these new developments based on sustainability and for the environment development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paradisiotis. There is one request from.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have heard many times the European Eco Forum being here. We have hopefully contributed to all your decisions. And I wanted to use this time, as we are coming to the close of the conference, to simply express our thanks, not only to you as organizers, your ministry, Arabella explicitly, because I think she was the heart and the soul in all this process. We felt that on every single step we did, starting from preparations in Geneva and, of course, coming here to the wonderful Cyprus. And being here, I fully understood the meaning of the word philoxenia. I think Zal was mentioning that yesterday in the cocktail evening. That is what hospitality should be. And you are receiving strangers as a friend. And what struck me most, and that's why I want to thank, and not only, as I said, the ministers, participants, my colleagues from NGOs, but I want to thank all those hundreds of people who are working behind the screens and who are making our presence here wonderful and easygoing. So, and I have been in many conferences, and that was the first time yesterday and the other days when I saw the security people, the service people who are giving us the food, and all those people being a part of that. So that for me means really inclusion and all being equal, not something for ministers, not something for participants, but for everyone. So I think this is a feeling what I will leave Cyprus with. So thank you for that, and thanks to all those people.
Thank you very much for your flattering words. We appreciate it very much. I think that there is another request, maybe for a final, the last one, yes.
Thank you. My name is Emer Manning, and I'm representing the National Youth Council of Ireland. Is this microphone broken? Yeah? Is it okay now? Yeah? Okay. That's good. Thank you for the floor. I would like to add to the intervention of my colleague, Mr. Hederman, who spoke earlier on behalf of the young people in attendance this week. Youth have a specific interest in ESD, but still in the discussions this week, we hear that schools are being put at the forefront of the ESD conversation. I would very much like to request that the non- and informal education sectors are given equal focus in the need to support young people's introduction and continuation of ESD. While the actions specified hugely welcome, we need a whole sectoral approach to reach young people who may not be involved in or may be disillusioned by the formal education. It is imperative that all young people are given the opportunity involved in ESD. Thank you for your time and support of NGOs and young people.
I will give now the floor to my colleague, Mr. Prodromou, for a small comment. Yes.
Just 1 minute to remind that in parallel with the outcomes of this important conference, of the 9th Ministerial Conference, we had yesterday the Ministers of Education and Development and high officials of the Mediterranean countries, together with intergovernmental organizations active in the region and the other stakeholders. And it is important that we also committed, of course, confirmed our commitment to promote education for sustainable development. And at the same time, we adopted the revised action plan towards 2030 on the Mediterranean strategy on education for sustainable development, which of course is in synergy with our general strategy, but at the same time we had the opportunity to consider the enhanced collaboration on education for sustainable development as an appropriate arena for the promotion and understanding and peace in our wider region, because the Mediterranean region faces also challenges of security at the same time that we have the great environmental challenges. So I would like to stress the fact that we now have an action plan also for the Mediterranean region, and to thank all the participants for their contribution. Thank you.
I would like to thank all speakers for their statements, their comments, their remarks. And before concluding, I would like once again to stress out our deep satisfaction towards the outcomes of this conference, and especially the Nicosia Declaration. I personally would like to thank all delegations for their valuable contribution. It has been a long and difficult process, but the outcome is ambitious and will continue to guide us forward towards a more sustainable and inclusive future. Equally important is the evaluation of the state of affairs in the pan-European region and the available policy options, including multilateral environmental agreements and public-private partnerships. Exchanging good practices and actively engaging civil society can play a vital role towards transforming the planet. We strongly support the reference made towards the unprovoked and unjustified aggression against Ukraine by the Russian Federation, and we urge countries to work together for the advancement of a sustainable recovery of the country. Cyprus is committed to capitalize on the results of this conference and stresses out the important role of the Environment for Europe process, bringing together all stakeholders for a sustainable future. Thank you very much for your attention.
And now we have the pleasure to host some more kids, some children coming from a school to join our conference and to give us the message and the breath of the new generation that is following all the effort to save this planet. Please let us have the children come inside to see what they prepared. It's
We can wait.
we can wait.
Bisa bedia agapume che nyanzoma se che dove malo ya ta dentro che la lasci ta zori ta punya disine che ti salassi ta saia da botagna tomiglio dona era ti calati di nuovo fianco Zilune di foni mas na gusti bandu se orighi Irini banduna provisti, odiana samanisi. India ke kara, meolu tu bosmuna kata. Ridoto atre onae così, me brasino galasio che soi. Oro se sase farisume, che mazisa prodocume. Navano nene asci, che gli manna sofri. Managi, managi, urane, matera urane. La bella imaste, managi, managi, urane, matera urane. La bella imaste, managi,
I think now we're all ready after accomplishing this valuable work and having the outcomes of our conference. It's the time to close the conference. We open the agenda of the closure. We inform the delegates that the summary of the conference will be available on the website. And I will also have to inform the delegates that the summary will be edited after the conference and posted on the website. And also we will have a brief factual report and the list of participants that will be finalized by the Secretariat after the conference, and it will be posted also on the website. Also, please note that if any delegation has particular comments or questions on the document to the co-chairs, they should be raised. And now I will invite the UNICE Executive Director, Mrs. Olga Algayerova, to make her closing remarks.
Dear friends, good afternoon. Now I seem to be over-ambitious. No speech can compete with such performance that we have seen just now. But I will try. Excellencies, ministers, distinguished Minister Prodan, distinguished Minister Karis, distinguished co-chairs of the conference, excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let's travel together shortly in our minds back to 2016, when the last Environment for Europe conference in Batumi took place. It was very successful, it was very encouraging, but during these 6 years since then, this period brought us many challenges during the preparation for our Nicosia conference. And of course, we had also moments of doubt. We were asking ourselves, will we ever be possible to meet again? And if, when? In what format? Many obstacles were here, and they indeed were very real. But we kept working and hoping, and now we are here. 2.5 days ago, we arrived in this hall and witnessed the impressive opening ceremony of this, our Nicosia conference. And today, now, we are going to conclude it. Actually, this Philoxenia Conference Center has held not just one, but 4 high-level meetings since Wednesday. Of course, the first was the 9th Environment for Europe Ministerial Conference and its framework. Then we had the 3rd high-level meeting of Education and Environment Ministries. In parallel, we had the high-level meeting of the Ministers for Education on Education for Sustainable Development, and the high-level meeting of Mediterranean Ministers of Education of the ESD Mediterranean Action Plan that were held yesterday. And just to mention, so the special sessions of both the UNEC Committee on Environmental Policy and the UNEC Steering Committee on Education for Sustainable Development were also held in Philoxenia on Monday and Tuesday. So thinking about such amount of content that has been packed in this week alone, it comes to mind that these days were a little bit like Korokolios. And Korokolios is this straw basket that our generous host gave us as a gift in memory of this wonderful country and its people. Korokolios looks rather small, but once we open it, we are amazed at so many useful and delicious. So let us take together another look at the sweet content of this week's Korokolios. You recognize the seriousness of the challenges facing our planet and our region and the need for a joint and coordinated response. We celebrated the memories of 31 years of the Environment for Europe process, the boldness of its founders, its proven track record, and its role in building a sustainable future. We recognize that greening the economy is of critical importance for the achievement of all the sustainable development goals and agreed on shared approaches to greening of infrastructure and tourism sectors. We celebrated the successful conclusion of the Batumi Action for Cleaner Air, reaffirmed our commitment to the continuing implementation of the voluntary pan-European strategic framework for greening the economy. We welcome the progress in the implementation of the voluntary commitments of the Batumi Initiative on Green Economy, and responding to the Nicosia call, added more than 60 new commitments. We took note of the 7th Pan-European Assessment, acknowledged the importance of regular indicator-based environmental assessments, and confirmed our commitment to keeping the Pan-European region under regular review. We commended the UNEC Environmental Performance Review Programme and endorsed the 4th cycle of environmental performance reviews. We also commended the general establishment of the shared environmental information system across the region, and we reaffirmed the importance of further strengthening and scaling up education for sustainable development by adopting the Nicosia Ministerial Statement on Education for Sustainable Development, including the framework for implementation of the UNEC Strategy for Education for Sustainable Development from 2021 till 2030. So there is much to celebrate, but we have heard also deep regrets. We regretted that the path of the Environment for Europe process towards a more sustainable pan-European region, coming such a long way from Dobrzysz Castle to Nicosia, was unfortunately violently interrupted in February 2022. We condemned the aggression against Ukraine and expressed our concern about the harmful impact that this aggression has already had and will have on the environment. And of course, we recognize the need to assess the environmental consequences of the military aggression against Ukraine, and affirmed our support to Ukraine in its reconstruction, inviting the UNEC, and you invited the UNEC Secretariat and partners to back this process. Of course, we are pleased to do so. In my opening remarks 2 days ago, I said that we here in Nicosia should answer the question, can our cooperation continue? Will it survive this test? And now I'm happy to state that, as imagined, the answer is yes. You have demonstrated your unity and determination to tackle pressing issues together in cooperation with UNEC member states, as well with other United Nations member states, to whom I am very grateful for being and working with us here during this week. So, ladies and gentlemen, Nicosia is a success. Now we finally can say it loudly. The Environment for Europe journey that began 31 years ago continues, and I'm proud that UNEC will continue to provide its secretariat services for this process. I'm grateful to my diligent and professional colleagues from the UNEC Secretariat and our partner organizations, especially UNEP. Thank you, Sonia, and your team, who have made a great contribution to the preparation of this Nicosia conference. Speaking of contributions, I'm pleased to take this opportunity to thank our donors whose contributions to the UNEC Environment for Europe Fund since Batumi enabled us to first conduct the midterm review of the Batumi conference's outcomes in 2019, and then support the organization of the Nicosia conference in 2022. So who are they? Cyprus, Switzerland, Norway, Italy, Netherlands, Germany, Austria, Serbia, and Finland. Thank you. Without your kind contribution, we wouldn't be here today. And finally, of course, I come back again to Cyprus. I would like to sincerely thank the government of Cyprus and personally Minister Podromou and Minister Cadiz. Thank you. All colleagues from an efficient and responsive host country secretariat led by Permanent Secretary Mr. Neophytos Papadopoulos and coordinated by, of course, Dr. Aravella Zachariou, who is also As you know, Aravella is also the chair of the UNEC Steering Committee on Education for Sustainable Development, and there is no need to introduce her. The people of Cyprus, the wonderful citizens, and of course, especially the children of Nicosia for their hospitality and friendliness. I want to thank to the local staff and our helpful volunteers at the airport, at the hotels, in the Philoxenia Conference Center, for their excellent help, as well as for smiles and sincere kindness. I wish to thank also It's my pleasure to thank also to the media representatives for genuine interest and help in highlighting our important work. Last but not least, of course, the ancient city of Nicosia, the name that our ministerial declaration will now bear. So, thank you for the perfect conference in Nicosia. There was too little time to study Greek, but I am sure that now all our delegates know by heart what philoxenia means, both as a word, hospitality, and as well as a collective action. Thank you, Cyprus, for this wonderful lesson. To conclude, dear colleagues, our Environment for Europe journey continues, and you decided to hold the next conference in 5 years. And I just hope that by then, our world will be cleaner, greener, more just, and more peaceful than we have it now. Let's make it happen. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mrs. Sarkagerova, for your remarks. And we also thank the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, as well our thanks to the UNEP and Mrs. Kohn, Sonia, for all the cooperation. I thank the ministers, other heads of delegations, and the delegates, of course, for their work that contributed to the successful outcome of this conference. We now have a declaration of Nicosia. It's an honor. It's a moment of celebration, but also a moment of responsibility. We express our hope that the outcomes of the conference will be successfully implemented, contributing to the advancement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. I thank the Secretariat here, our Secretariat in Cyprus, for their efficient support and organization of the conference, but also thanks to the UNICE Secretariat. I also thank the interpreters and the technical personnel for their useful work that contributed to the smooth running of the conference and enabled the dialogue between the delegations. Finally, we invite the conference speakers to send their electronic version of the presentations and interventions to the Secretariat for posting on the conference website. I wish to everyone that you will extend your stay here in Cyprus to have a pleasant stay. And thank you all. We have to applaud the good work that was done and the hope we have to achieve our goals and to have a really sustainable environment.